Meanwhile, the government is facing sharp scrutiny over the series of state-sponsored abductions and arrests targeting participants in the recent anti-government protests, with reports of illegal detentions and abductions. Calls for restraint have been directed at the authorities and President William Ruto. Some of the protesters are reported to have sought refuge in unknown locations, fearing arrest and for their safety. Here's that story. Activist Bill Eugene Omolo finds refuge in this secluded forest far from Nairobi as he comes to terms with what he describes was a harrowing experience. He was abducted by unidentified individuals following his involvement in protests against the government.
They took me into a room and then I was told to sit down, forcefully. Once I sat down, it was a cold floor. They asked me to remove my pants, my tracksuit. So I removed my tracksuit. They even took my shoes off from me. They took my shirt off from me.
Omolo was arrested on the 20th of June in Nairobi while he was heading home after a day of protesting against the Finance Bill 2024, and was later released the following day without any charges. It was this experience, he says, that instilled in him a profound fear for his safety, compelling him to seek refuge away from the city. However, requests for comment on the conditions of detainees went unanswered by police and intelligence services. Saturday Nation columnist and a staffer in the Office of Minority Leader in the National Assembly, Gabriel Oguda, also alluded to filthy conditions in police cells in Kajiado, where his abductors took him last week. The surge in arrests, especially at the onset of the demonstrations and subsequent weeks, has intensified pressure on the government as the Gen Z-led protest movement has evolved from opposing tax increases to demanding for President William Ruto to step down.
You coming and taking us because we're demanding for our rights, it's so unlawful. It's against the Constitution, and I feel like the people that are doing this are supposed to be held accountable.
The 30 or more cases that Amnesty and the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights and the Law Society of Kenya have documented, many people were not accorded their rights under the law. And therefore, it takes us sadly into the phenomena that we call forceful abductions and enforced disappearances. An enforced disappearance essentially is a practice of abducting somebody. And in some cases you blindfold them, you take them to a non-licensed or non-registered police station, and you hold them against their will without any of the rights that they have.
The crackdown has some protesters rethinking strategy after violence and looting marred this week's demonstrations.
The last 2 weeks we've seen a number of very disturbing patterns. They include, for example, the use of excessive force on protesters. It also has now begun to develop this, I guess, this pattern that we had not seen probably at this scale since the 1980s, where people who are considered to be protesters or organizers or even just simply voices of dissent are being plucked from their homes, or even as they go to church with their family.
The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights reported 32 cases of enforced and involuntary disappearances and 627 instances of arrests of protesters, with several others hiding due to threats by unknown individuals. The methods of abductions and arrests witnessed in the recent days has invited intense scrutiny, with a section of political leaders, the clergy and activists urging the government to exercise restraint, warning that suppressing public dissent could lead the country back to darker times.
I just miss home, and I personally feel like, I'm a refugee in my own country, but one day, one time, maybe the people that we are fighting for will understand what's happening.